It constituted the most expansive, savage, and unforgiving theater of the whole global conflict. Millions of troops collided across grain pastures, icy woodlands, and municipalities decimated into smoldering wreckage. There existed zero relief, zero regulations, and zero mercy. From the initial blast of Operation Barbarossa until the collapse of Berlin, the Eastern Front transformed into an exposed abattoir, wherein a warrior's existence became devoured by artillery blasts, sickness, and starvation. The engagements were not mere skirmishes. It represented butchery that extended for weeks, featuring climates that scorched the flesh or turned it to ice. The adversary remained not merely ahead. They hid within the clouds, within the timber, inside every hollow. For the German foot soldiers, every 24 hours in the East constituted a struggle not for triumph, but to endure one more moment. This remained no mere military endeavor. It constituted absolute warfare. It was the underworld, and everybody who survived it abandoned a fragment of their spirit entombed inside the crimson soil of Russia. Foot soldiers under collapse. During the summertime of 1941, German foot soldiers traversed the eastern frontier with a steady pace. They donned spotless attire, toted orderly rucksacks, possessed battle provisions, and trekked, assured that the operation would be rapid. They were informed that the Soviets were subpar, that the Bolshevik system was feeble, and that a few months would be sufficient to reach Moscow. Foot soldiers served as the fundamental backbone of the Wehrmacht. Following the mechanized transports, they were the personnel who captured the settlements, swept the woodlands, and defended the intersections. Numerous individuals arrived following years of preparation, others from engagements across France or the Balkans. They remained heavily equipped, thoroughly structured, and assured regarding their leadership. The initial weeks of Barbarossa appeared to validate that assurance of dominance. Formations pushed forward up to 50 kilometers each day. Soviet settlements collapsed, featuring minimal or zero combat. German troops witnessed Red Army captives yielding in massive crowds, disarrayed, poorly provisioned. Within their correspondence homeward, they characterized the battle line as a trek eastward, disrupted merely by the incineration of deserted settlements and boundless planted pastures. There existed spirit, assurance, and organization. 4 years subsequently, in 1945, that infantry no longer survived. Whatever endured comprised fragments, shattered squads, hurriedly gathered factions, unseasoned substitute troops, elderly males reinstated onto the battle line, and youthful males lacking fundamental training. Rather than pushing forward, they withdrew. Rather than trekking, they escaped. Rather than vanquishing, they defended unto their demises inside an improvised ditch. The battle line was no longer a boundary. It represented absolute collapse. The contrast remained noticeable across every specific. During 1941, German foot soldiers possessed mobility, aerial backing, consistent meals, and plentiful munitions. During 1945, they trekked shoeless, consumed rotting loaves or purloined Soviet tins, and discharged weapons exclusively whenever it remained worthwhile to conserve rounds. Squads re-equipped across the terrain, repurposing firearms from the deceased or gathering intact explosives. The freezing temperatures remained identical, yet there existed zero additional backup footwear or arid covers. For the foot soldiers, the concluding engagements of the Third Reich were endured similarly to a condemnation lacking a tribunal. Across East Prussia, platoons became encircled individually by Soviet forces, 5 multiples their total. German outposts received commands to hold out down to the final individual. Numerous among them possessed zero backing, zero relays, zero chance for withdrawal. Emplacements remained defended across hours or days until nobody remained breathing. Inside the settlements eastward of the Oda, troops excavated ditches amid the icy corpses of perished non-combatants. Dwellings became hasty strongholds, utilizing dirt sacks across the glass and units comprising merely 5 or 6 individuals. The clashes proved short, savage, occasionally close quarters. Among the foot soldiers, there existed zero further discussion regarding divisions. They combated inside segments, frequently lacking communication alongside one another. There existed zero cycling, zero relief, zero additional troops. Simultaneously, the Red Army pushed forward, utilizing a structure the Germans could no longer equal. Every Soviet force remained backed by armor, cannons, and resources. The German foot soldiers, conversely, withdrew utilizing their feet, lacking aerial backing or transports. Across certain zones, the identical unit battled across weeks, lacking a departure from the perimeter. Near a crucial juncture across Silesia, a band of Heer troops expended 15 days defending inside an unidentified settlement encircled, lacking resources, trading gunfire and interring their peers inside cavities of icy dirt. Nobody endured. Spirit during those concluding months represented a blend of terror and surrender. Numerous troops understood the conflict stood forfeited. They no longer trusted in broadcasts, triumph addresses, or directives originating from the supreme commanders. Yet they could not yield either. The narratives arriving from the east, assaults, dismemberments, and immediate killings reminded them that getting captured by the Red Army might represent a penalty more severe than passing. The singular alternative remained to endure, even if it lasted for a handful of additional hours. Inside Berlin, the foot soldiers became shrunken into regimental remnants. Troops detached from their squads, adolescents conscripted into the Volksturm, alongside seasoned fighters of the conflict across the east. Commanders handed out panzerfasts to youthful males who had never discharged a firearm. They fortified themselves inside governmental structures, underground rail depots, and relay centers. Every crossing became a shooting spot, every glass pane a boundary of protection. Conditions remained barbaric. Males slumbered amid debris, consumed whatever they might scrounge. Munitions remained tallied item by item. The Luftwaffe no longer survived. Cannons scarcely reacted. The Soviets shelled without pause. Whenever Soviet foot soldiers traversed the avenue, they operated so utilizing fire-spewing devices, detonators, and mechanized backing. The Germans retaliated utilizing carabiner firearms, explosives, and the survivors of their MG rapid-fire weapons. Near the Reichsrist, defense proved uniquely ferocious. Foot soldier segments became split into factions of 4 or 5 individuals per chamber. The combat blazed level by level, staircase by staircase. There existed zero relief. Across one edge, the Soviets who desired to capture the emblem of Nazism. Across the opposite, depleted, filthy troops, a few bleeding, whose singular focus remained fighting toward the bleak conclusion. They combated utilizing blades, daggers, and headgear. Certain skirmishes concluded in quietness. Both troops, one Soviet and one German, rested perished a couple of meters distant, lacking anybody observing. The disparity compared to 1941 remained savage. During the initial days regarding the incursion into the Soviet Union, German troops captured complete municipalities, lacking discharging a round. Settlements became abandoned by escaping citizens. Hostile outposts collapsed sequentially. Spirit stood elevated, supply chains capable, structure flawless. The troops trekked inside formations, structured, featuring unceasing backing. During 1945, the German foot soldiers represented a mosaic of ruins. Every faction battled independently, lacking synchronization, lacking a strategy. The battle boundaries no longer survived. Resistance occurred at every spot, yet lacking persistence. Occasionally, one avenue remained protected, yet the adjoining one remained unprotected. Commanders issued commands lacking charts, lacking relays, lacking awareness regarding whoever stayed breathing or perished. Inside tiny municipalities, the ultimate combat proved additionally disordered. During specific situations, German foot soldiers reached a deserted settlement solely to realize the following morning that the battle line had already passed them over. During alternative instances, they battled hostile Soviet squads across hours solely to receive commands to withdraw lacking resources. There existed zero transports. There existed zero equines. Trekking represented the singular alternative. A handful tried to traverse the Ella, attempting to yield to the Americans, yet numerous became blocked by Soviet scouting groups prior to reaching it. Anybody who endured became dispatched to captive of war facilities. Numerous individuals never came back. For the German foot soldiers, capitulation represented zero assurance regarding existence. The handful of seasoned fighters who had battled since 1941 and remained continually breathing during 1945 conversed amongst one another regarding the disparity. They recollected Smolensk, Kiev, Minsk. They recollected treks under the daylight, structured transport lines, pristine attire. Currently, they slumbered inside submerged underground passageways, relieved themselves inside oxidized tins, and consumed purloined loaves. They no longer trusted in whatever conclusion. They exclusively understood that whatever they had endured could not endure significantly further. The initial engagement, the starting conflicts of Barbarossa. On the 22nd of June, 1941, at 3:15 in the morning, the initial German explosives traversed the boundary toward the Soviet Union. Cannons commenced battering Soviet outposts across the complete battle boundary stretching from the Baltic Sea toward the Black Sea. Altogether, over 3 million German troops, escorted by roughly 1 million Axis partners, initiated Operation Barbarossa. For the Heer foot soldiers, that sunrise signaled the commencement of a conflict distinct from any prior. They had been informed that the Soviets remained badly structured, badly equipped, and governmentally fragile. Yet the absolute vastness of the domain, the thickness of the protection, and the toughness of certain Red Army squads rapidly demonstrated that incorrect. During the initial days, the German assault depended upon the concept of blitzkrieg. The Panzer forces pushed forward swiftly, surrounding Soviet outposts, and the foot soldiers trailed aft, capturing settlements, sweeping woodlands, claiming crossings, and eliminating clusters of defiance. The squads remained intact, synchronized, and properly provisioned. Every troop understood its function. Every segment retaliated with gunfire. Troops became structured into platoons featuring MG-34 rapid-fire weapons, firearm teams, spotters, engineers, and translators to handle non-combatants. The German military functioned with exactness, yet the truth at the battle line demonstrated that Soviet defiance remained not continually feeble. Although numerous Red Army squads crumbled after experiencing the starting strike, others battled toward the grim conclusion. Across certain zones, the Germans discovered thoroughly built strongholds, entrenched squads that discharged weapons down to the final individual, and massive cannons that delayed the push. The German foot soldiers, who had anticipated pushing forward unchallenged, rapidly needed to battle, dwelling by dwelling, ditch by ditch, occasionally across planted pastures, occasionally across timber settlements, transformed into improvised strongholds. Every meter started to matter. On the 24th of June, close to Grodno, a German troop seeking to traverse a woodland became ambushed by a Soviet regiment that had succeeded in hiding anti-armor emplacements and massive rapid-fire weapons. Whatever was intended to constitute a basic sweeping maneuver transitioned into a 10-hour engagement featuring fatalities across both factions. The German foot soldiers, habituated to synchronizing alongside the mechanized push, realized that inside forested or marshy terrains, they needed to push forward, isolated. During numerous situations, lacking aerial backing or the speed of panzers, the average trooper experienced those starting days utilizing a blend of thrill and assurance. He deemed himself a component of an unstoppable military, yet they remained additionally commencing to witness the severity of the fresh battle line. Treks reaching 40 kilometers per day beneath an unforgiving daylight. Combat zones strewn featuring unburied remains, starvation, a shortage of potable liquid, and incinerated settlements. Certain troops recorded inside their journals that the Soviets appeared barbaric, yet others remained commencing to observe that such savagery represented not frailty, but instead ferocious defiance. One among the starting significant engagements represented the conflict for Minsk. There, German squads succeeded in surrounding the Soviet Western Front and apprehended over 300,000 troops. Yet for the foot soldiers, this triumph additionally required days of monitoring limitless lines of captives trekking amid corpses, neutralizing detached hostile outposts, and primarily restructuring supply pathways across a domain lacking asphalted pathways, lacking markers, and lacking sufficient facilities. Pushing forward proved not simple. Each crossing needed to become fixed, each waterway traversed utilizing makeshift methods, and each municipality examined regarding the danger of subversion. The Red Army, despite being disarrayed, educated themselves rapidly. Around July, traps started to multiply. Tiny factions of Soviet troops severed resource pathways, assaulted forward bases, and subsequently withdrew into the woodland. The German foot soldiers needed to adjust. Whatever had originally represented a conflict of defined outposts transitioned into a conflict of tension. Unceasing scouting, evening monitoring, and battling against adversaries who manifested and vanished amid the timber. Across the south, defiance proved more intense than anticipated. While seeking to capture Kyiv, German forces confronted a ferocious protection. The foot soldier forces of Army Group South needed to traverse the Dnieper, experiencing unceasing gunfire during maneuvers that generated thousands of fatalities. The combat occurred beneath the scorching daylight inside badly excavated ditches featuring resources progressively distant from the vanguard. Equine-pulled carts transported munitions. Traveling galleys remained overloaded, and the injured lingered across hours to become extracted. During numerous situations, they became simply abandoned. The German foot soldier, who during June assumed he remained inside a swift operation, remained already commencing to experience the pressure around August. Numerous troops failed to comprehend exactly how the Red Army, vanquished repeatedly, continually persevered in resisting. Broadcasts stated the adversary remained crumbling, yet reality across the terrain failed to validate this. Inside ruined settlements, they continually confronted hidden marksmen. Inside maize pastures, they continually experienced traps. And inside the woodlands, they continually detected sporadic shooting evening following evening. While the weeks elapsed, the battle line expanded. Resource pathways extended. Foot soldier squads started to separate to monitor additional territory. Fatalities became substituted by minimally prepared draftees. Footwear deteriorated. Meals shipped delayed or completely failed to arrive. Commanders started to observe that the pace of progression had decelerated and that Soviet defiance, completely opposite to vanishing, remained restructuring. And regardless of everything, the command remained to continue pushing forward. There existed zero withdrawal. There existed zero intermission. Squads acquired charts lacking specifics, excessively lofty goals, and the directive to uphold propulsion. Every trooper who perished became substituted. A squad that experienced fatalities became bolstered utilizing bureaucratic staff or operators. Foot soldiers remained no longer merely foot soldiers. They represented whatever survived, everybody who might grip a firearm. Winter arrives whenever freezing replaced progression. For the foot soldiers of the Third Reich, the onset of the Russian freezing season was not merely a shift of climate. It constituted a soundless condemnation. Commencing in November 1941, when climates started to plummet underneath -20 degrees Celsius, the conflict shifted into an alternative entity. The adversary was no longer exclusively the Red Army. The freezing temperatures grew more deadly than projectiles, and the males who had traversed the boundary, wearing intermediate garments and lacking sufficient gear, started to perish by the hundreds without a lone round getting discharged. During the starting days, when the dirt solidified and the pathways iced over, squads continually attempted to push forward. Transport tires grew jammed, motors iced over at evening. Rapid-fire weapons ceased functioning because of gathered frost. Firearms needed to be heated, utilizing exposed palms prior to shooting, and that required subjecting the digits to the icy oxygen where they started to decay within under 1 minute. Certain troops attempted to relieve themselves atop the metallic components to dissolve the ice, yet that merely functioned for a handful of seconds. Slumber evolved into a danger. Numerous troops remained motionless inside the ditch, shielded by a cover, and essentially failed to rouse. The physique powered off without notification. Commanders would scout the emplacements during the daybreaks and discover iced males featuring their vision wide, gripping their firearms, as though continually anticipating an assault. Others roused featuring rigid, necrotic lower limbs, unfeasible to rescue. The severe chill failed to register as coldness. It registered similarly to an advancing paralysis. Initially, the soles, subsequently the palms, and ultimately the intellect. Meals shipped iced. Tins remained impossible to breach. Loaves remained similar to rock. Liquid needed to become warmed utilizing a timber blaze, yet timber remained rare. Anybody who attempted to thaw snow utilizing a wax light or an improvised tin merely acquired a tiny amount of soiled fluid. Bowel infections, regurgitation, and high temperatures remained widespread. There existed zero treatments. There existed zero physicians. Occasionally, there existed absolutely zero painkillers. The protective emplacements iced over alongside the terrain. The ditches remained impossible to excavate. Merely superficial cavities might become excavated, or wreckage utilized as protection. Numerous individuals entombed themselves inside debris, ignited blazes inside casks, incinerated entryways, furnishings, additionally literature. Across the exposed terrain, they clustered 5 or 6 individuals deep within tiny sanctuaries, shielded utilizing canvases and shielded utilizing dirt, attempting to preserve physical warmth. Internally, the oxygen remained suffocating. They slumbered across rotations shrouded inside soaked covers, adjacent to remains that remained currently impossible to enter. The freezing season additionally altered the method of battling. There existed zero further massive pushes. Everything became shrunk to maintaining the emplacement. The projectiles failed to screech. They struck crisply, swiftly, and the physiques collapsed forcefully atop the frost. Occasionally, zero noise might become detected across hours. Merely the grinding of footwear atop the glaze. Soviet marksmen concealed themselves inside smokestacks amid limbs, inside ruined lofts. They lingered for days. A single incorrect motion, a protruding skull, a gleam of steel, and the round would arrive lacking notification. The injured perished rapidly. Plasma iced over within seconds. A limb decimated by an explosive would become darkened, preceding assistance managing to show up. Transports cracked inside the chill. A tire drenched featuring frost shifted into rigid boards. There existed zero method to dehydrate them, and whenever the trooper failed to acquire a substitute, he understood that within a handful of days his digits would detach completely. Remains accumulated near the perimeters of emplacements. They remained impossible to enter. They became stacked high. They became utilized as barricades. A handful became shielded, utilizing limbs. The rest basically stayed unprotected, iced inside the postures where they perished. During the core of the evening, rodents and feral hounds would approach and consume them. Occasionally, the identical trooper maintaining watch would stroll past an iced corpse that had represented his peer the prior week. Correspondence originating homeward arrived delayed or entirely failed to arrive. The dispatches remained ambiguous. There existed chatter regarding valiant defiance, regarding a provisional freezing season. Yet the troops at the vanguard understood the reality remained alternative. The Red Army adjusted toward the weather, retaliated utilizing forces attired inside ivory jackets, snowboards, and mitts. They possessed fabric footwear, pelt-covered headgear, and primarily, they failed to halt. Soviet troops combated during evening at daybreak amid snowstorms. They attacked emplacements utilizing blades, explosives, and fire-spewing devices. The Germans possessed zero resources to retaliate utilizing. The freezing season additionally ruined obedience. Troops who across France had obeyed commands lacking hesitation currently sobbed inside the ditches. Certain individuals declined to exit the shelter. Others simulated sickness. Commanders enacted severe responses, detentions, penalties, additionally, rapid killings regarding abandonment. Yet they understood the resolve remained shattered. The conflict that had commenced featuring structured lines of thoroughly provisioned troops had transitioned into a barbaric close-quarters clash concerning every fragment of warmth, every tobacco roll, every sip of warm broth. Stalingrad, underworld atop Earth. On the 23rd of August, 1942, German cannons initiated the conflict of Stalingrad, featuring a continuous bellow that demolished complete districts and scattered cinders across a continually breathing municipality. Across hours, fire-starting explosives shifted the vulgar quays into an inferno of petroleum, charcoal, and corpses combusting inside the flow. The following daybreak, whenever the initial foot soldier squads of the 71st Force pushed forward across the wreckage, troops tripped across contorted tracks and combusting timbers and slashed their pathway utilizing blades past incinerated citizens suspended from liquefied terraces. Starting that instance forward, the engagement stopped representing a maneuver and evolved into a firestorm that pulverized humans and equipment utilizing a sluggishness that appeared infinite. Every sector represented a distinct engagement. Inside the avenues of the Dzerzhinsky machinery facility, German foot soldiers collided against Maxim rapid-fire weapon emplacements hidden to the rear of mounds of metallic debris. The scorching steel sliced across a tire similarly to shaving knives. Troops tumbling toward the dirt seared their palms atop continually glowing steel plating. They pushed forward within duos, shielding themselves, utilizing construction boards acting as makeshift protectors. Yet the 7.62 mm projectiles shattered the timber, and fragmenting shards lodged beneath their cuticles. Every instance a squad succeeded to breach a workroom. They needed to sweep petroleum-drenched surfaces, battle their pathway past inverted machinery, and observe the timbers overhead, wherever Soviet marksmen relocated locations, slithering similarly to felines amid the incinerated plastics. The Soviets, regarding their role, acquired humans while rushing. Transports traversing the Volga during evening featuring extra troops originating from the 62nd Military. Occasionally, the vessels docked shielded utilizing an ash veil. Alternative instances, they became noticed and decimated by German cannons. Anybody who endured off-loaded, drenched, dragging boxes of munitions and 50mm cannons that scarcely survived a 24-hour period. They became dispatched, lacking hesitation toward the manufacturing zones. Numerous individuals lacked firearms. They concealed themselves to the rear of punctured barriers, anticipating to retrieve one originating from a newly perished pier. "One firearm, two troops," the commissa reiterated, who conversely confronted the German rear detachment, featuring Tokarev handguns atop their waistbands, and the unyielding command to execute anybody who withdrew. The engagement rapidly expanded inside the cellar and across the canopies. The Germans titled this category of combat Ratten, rodent combat. Across surface elevation, the structures represented vacant husks. Existence navigated beneath amid shattered bases and drainage passageways wherever troops slumbered atop pulverized crystal and inhaled concrete debris. Near the Barakardi facility, the pillars possessed shattered, and every chamber represented an isolated zone. Russians inside one edge, Germans inside the adjoining, divided exclusively via a dividing barrier. Explosives breached the vapor tubes, and the oxygen pact featuring a scalding mist that obscured both factions. Males fumbled toward one another, recognizing one another exclusively via the resonance regarding their dialect preceding thrusting their blades. Across Mamay of Kirin, the dirt shifted every day into gore-soaked slime. During sunrise, a German regiment captured the peak. During twilight, a Soviet retaliation retook it. The incline remained dotted, featuring layered impacts. Corpses iced over during the evening and became partially entombed whenever the noon daylight melted the earth. Engineers excavated sanctuaries beneath cannon shelling, discovered newly deceased skeletons, and scooped them aside, lacking interruption. The supreme leadership guaranteed additional forces that failed to emerge simply because the Luftwaffe no longer dominated the atmosphere. Soviet Ilos scoured the pathways, their fragments decimating Opel Blitz transports carrying dark loaves and firearm munitions. Alongside October, the freezing climate emerged, and the smell altered. The wreckage kept a sugary, sharp scent. Mortal tissue combined featuring damp concrete. The rodents developed extremely bloated, that it proved challenging to separate them from felines. They ventured to chew atop the footwear and necrotic digits regarding the injured. Near the medical posts, depleted physicians severed appendages, utilizing dull blades lacking numbing agents. Meanwhile, outdoors, Stukers screamed past, releasing 250-kilogram massive blast explosives. Every detonation extinguished the oil lanterns, and the operators stayed inside the blackness, exploring torn ligaments via the illumination of an electric torch gripped by a trembling assistant. The evenings were packed with stealth scouting units. German strike teams erupted inside partially destroyed dwellings, tossing baton explosives and blindly depleting their MP-40 ammunition holders, merely to realize the Soviets had smashed an opening to the neighboring dwelling and manifested at their rear. The singular stationary anchor remained the Vulgar. The Soviets held its western edge, utilizing anti-flyer cannon emplacements atop dirt foundations, which, lacking skyward marks, discharged flatly against the German outposts. Glowing pathways intersected the atmosphere like the skeleton of an illuminated beast. German cannons retaliated utilizing 105mm launchers, ripping sections of dirt and spreading shards of destroyed vessels over the freezing liquid. Starvation joined the dynamic. German provisions shrank to 200 grams of loaves or tins of equine flesh seized from the Romanian Sixth Force. The Soviets endured on uncooked powder, blended with document shreds and broths, simmered utilizing cowhide straps. Frequently, the trading of gunfire paused for a handful of moments whenever a shipment of crackers arrived at the boundaries, and everybody, Russians and Germans, leaped upon them like beasts without differentiating garments. The starting instances of bowel disease and severe fever manifested across the German faction. Medics misted bleach inside makeshift waste pits, yet the ice rendered excavating profound cavities unfeasible, and the waste stayed unprotected, prepared to contaminate the subsequent rotation. Commander Pallas commanded a focusing of operations regarding the Krashy Oktyaba facility during mid-November. Assured that the manufacturing hub represented the solution toward dividing the municipality into two, the assault commenced utilizing wiping gunfire originating from PaK-40s located inside adjoining sectors. German artillery obliterated complete partitions, and the foot soldiers pushed forward, following veils of debris that shrunk sight toward a handful of meters. Yet whenever the Germans breached the workspaces, they discovered passageways obstructed utilizing heaps of metallic panels, structuring tiered barricades. Soviet DP rapid-fire weapons gazed outward, originating from openings amid the iron sheets, and slaughtered males who attempted to traverse. German engineers tossed destruction detonators that elevated surges of oxidation. Following every blast, fresh Soviet profiles manifested, shielded inside ash, and prepared to perish atop the exact floors they remained protecting. Inside the subterranean passageways of that facility, the dampness shifted the masonry into slick slime. The Russians routed power wires across submerged pathways and linked them toward apprehended power machines, shocking the liquid until victims perished inside a convulsion. The Germans retaliated utilizing Fleminger 41 fire-spewing devices. They blasted streams of blaze that adhered against the barriers and depleted the breathable air inside the passageways within moments. The shrieks of the confined shifted into high-pitched beastly noises, preceding perishing, featuring a sizzle while they depleted their ultimate gulp of oxygen. After exiting, the scorched flesh of the adversary adhered toward the combusting chemicals and peeled away from their skeletons, similarly to charred timber. The freezing season enveloped both militaries. Snowstorms obscured the cannon fog, and males from contrary factions frequently tripped across one another inside soot-packed passageways. They discharged weapons against one another at immediate proximity and proceeded pushing forward, possessing zero duration to execute the collapsed. Electric torches depleted their power cells. Timepieces halted. Chronology forfeited significance. Exclusively, the iron odor of plasma and the unceasing roar of the Kartas, titled Stalin's Organs, distinguished the day. Whenever the missiles struck, extreme compression drained the Germans' respiratory organs, shattered hearing drums, and burst oculars. Occasionally males endured sightless and unhearing until they were guided stumbling toward a shelter where they were dressed and commanded to head back instantly toward the boundary. Supreme leadership directives demanded the seizure of the primary train depot, a chaotic pile of wreckage that swapped control, reaching 15 instances during one lone day. There, destroyed train carriages functioned identically to an obstacle. Every inverted engine functioned as an organic stronghold holding explosive fragments. The Russians discharged weapons from the canopies of exposed edge carts. The Germans slithered underneath metallic bolts, repurposing their headgear as scoops to clear debris and create viewing gaps. Missing fuel, German mechanized transports pushed forward solely a handful of meters preceding turning stationary, shifted into battling structures. The Soviets encircled them during evening, adhered anti-armor explosives against their plating, and triggered them. By daybreak, the ruins of incinerated metal and darkened viewing slots endured, continually reeking of explosive powder and burned tissue. During December, when the vulgar waterway started to ice over, starvation and chill exceeded every prior estimate. Males honored regarding operations across France severed sections of hide from their footwear and simmered them alongside charcoal waste to generate a dense, sour-tasting broth. Russians ripped asphalt document sheets from their canopies and incinerated them for heat, breathing a poisonous blend that rendered them lightheaded and inflamed their oculars. Near vanguard leadership stations, broadcasts no longer functioned. Transmitters became decimated by cannons, or essentially iced over and fractured. Commanders penned dispatches atop oil-spotted parchment and dispatched them utilizing the palm of a messenger who frequently never showed up. The segregation turned absolute. Squads combated across days, lacking awareness concerning whatever was occurring 2 sectors distant. On the 19th of November, Operation Uranus finalized the trapping regarding the 6th Force. Soviet mechanized squads traversed the icy flatlands toward the northern and southern regions, surrounding the Romanians and shutting the squeeze upon Kalakondan. Regarding the German foot soldiers confined inside the municipality, the shift proved instantaneous. The 88mm cannons that had backed them up to then halted booming. Their personal cannons turned quiet. The meal vessels never traversed the liquid anew. The males started to measure 40 or 50 kilograms. Their jackets shifted into coatings of darkened oil, their headgear dishes inside which they thawed frost to consume. Munitions became measured away toward the stage of discharging exclusively whenever the adversary remained completely nearby, that the spark burned the barrier. Certain scouting units consumed uncooked equine flesh. Others withdrew toward submerged basements to pillage casks of manufacturing lubricant and blend it alongside lumber powder flakes. They perished originating from bowel disease preceding becoming extracted. Across the Soviet faction, the agony represented something distinct, yet identically severe. The fatalities proved massive. Every squad gathered unseasoned substitutes. They became dispatched toward the vanguard bearing their identities and a firearm whose firing mechanism occasionally failed to secure. Belief regarding triumph remained matched alongside the absolute reality of martyrdom. Every meter required dozens of males. Ideological commanders walked the ditches supportively, yet the terror concerning the NKVD squads who executed escapees remained as genuine similarly to the danger regarding a German MG-42. Regardless, they proceeded pushing forward meter following meter. The command remained distinct: maintain the adversary fastened against the debris until they asphyxiated. During January 1943, the Germans executed an ultimate assault approaching the water's edge to relink their boundary alongside cargo flyers, releasing canisters from 1,500 meters. The bundles plummeted, dispersed, numerous toward Soviet control, others plunging inside slushy frost and getting misplaced. The German foot soldiers exited, originating from their shelters shrouded inside covers that substituted their regular military jackets. Their mouths remained cracked, their digits darkened from freezing damage, their vision vacant. Following every rush, the living withdrew, pulling piers lacking their soles or palms, mutilated via explosive impacts. Nobody wept. There existed 0 droplets remaining, exclusively utter depletion. The rodents proceeded to multiply. Inside the passageways, they consumed remains lacking discrimination regarding allegiance. The troops stalked certain ones and cooked them above power cable blazes. The flesh reeked similarly to refuse, yet it represented nourishment. Liquid became restricted toward 1 vessel per individual. Frost blended alongside crushed currency became thawed, scraping their windpipes whenever ingested. Spouses authored correspondence that would never depart the municipality. Household pictures became adhered against their torsos, utilizing oil to ensure they would not misplace them. Approaching the conclusion of January, the gunfire had turned increasingly scattered. Exclusively wreckage endured, mounds of debris and contorted projections that groaned inside the breeze. The plazas became blanketed inside a fresh quietness interrupted via remote cannon blasts or the clatter of soaring metal fragments. Inside the GUM, across the primary plaza, a small group of Germans lacking munitions yielded toward a Soviet segment, their visages blanketed inside ash. They passed across the survivors of their firearms identically to worthless branches. One among them gripped a packaging holding 2 rotting crackers. He presented it toward his detainers, featuring a blend of humiliation and pleading. There existed 0 remarks, exclusively the flat noise of footwear atop compacted frost, while they trekked beneath watch, approaching the vulgar slime, gore, and hopelessness. Following Stalingrad, the eastern battle line stalled into hundreds of kilometers, comprising quickly excavated ditches amid pastures of burned grain, destroyed settlements and inclines covered featuring mortal ruins. The German push remained no longer achievable. Withdrawal represented additionally not an alternative. The Heer foot soldiers remained compelled to protect every boundary identically to if it represented the brink of a precipice. And they executed it through excavating, scoop in palm, inside precipitation, inside frost, beneath gunfire. Ditch combat across the east possessed 0 of the structured regularity regarding the Great War. There existed 0 permanent zones or specific charts. The boundaries shifted every day. An incline would become captured during sunrise and forfeited preceding evening. A woodland would shift into a German fortress one week and a fatal snare the following. The ditches represented foul cavities, half a meter profound, quickly excavated utilizing oxidized implements or utilizing blades. 0 fluid clearing, 0 canopy, 0 relief. During springtime, the slime consumed their footwear completely. The males plunged, reaching their joints, and expended days featuring their soles drenched. The initial instances of trench ailment manifested. The tissue started to shift dark. The agony proved intolerable, and ultimately, the digits detached autonomously. There existed 0 emergency treatment supplies or physicians accessible. The medics adapted utilizing repurposed wraps or excised the perished sections utilizing a blade, occasionally lacking numbing agents, merely a timber stick to clamp down onto. The provisions remained scarce. 1 block of grain for 6 males, garlic broth thinned utilizing precipitation fluid, preserved flesh that reeked spoiled, and whenever there existed zero nourishment, it became purloined, originating from Russians, originating from citizens, originating from deceased peers, the identical situation featuring covers, jackets, mitts. The brotherhood that had remained crucial during 1941 remained disintegrating inside every meter of slime and gore. The evenings proved harsher. Inside the ditches, the chill proved stunning. A person could not slumber for beyond half an hour, simultaneously lacking the danger regarding turning to ice. Watch rotations remained unceasing, and any motion beyond the cavity equated to jeopardizing existence. Russian marksmen, concealed amid limbs or inside empty trunks, discharged at whatever object that shifted. Occasionally, they targeted not toward the skull, but toward the abdomen to force the bleeding male to shriek. Whenever somebody stepped outward to assist him, they discharged anew. It became titled lure hunting. The daytime commenced inside quietness. Subsequently, Soviet explosives dropped sporadically. 1, 2, 20, and the atmosphere packed, featuring debris. The males flattened themselves towards the ditch barriers, shielding their skulls utilizing their headgear, praying it would not represent the ultimate strike. Occasionally, an adjacent blast would render them unhearing or slice a limb or rip an appendage completely away. If they remained fortunate, they perished lacking sensing it. Whenever not, they drained plasma toward demise inside moments while slime leaked inside their gashes. The Soviets charged inside surges, 3 formations of males sprinting over the exposed terrain. The Germans retaliated utilizing everything: firearms, MG-42 rapid-fire weapons, explosives. The starting Soviet formations collapsed, yet 3 additional formations pursued, and subsequently alternative ones, until ultimately somebody accessed the ditch. Subsequently, the close-quarters clash commenced. There existed 0 strategies, exclusively daggers, blades, scoops. They struck one another utilizing their headgear, their firearm stocks, their palms. The slime blended alongside gore. The terrain remained covered, featuring bowels, molars, shattered ammunition straps, and intact detonators. Whenever the combat concluded, anybody remaining upright pulled the injured and headed backward toward excavating. Endlessly excavating. The emplacements became bolstered, utilizing boards originating from demolished dwellings alongside sacks of iced dirt, alongside the remains of the perished. Certain troops positioned corpses, acting as shielding. They repurposed them similarly to barriers, chairs, and barricades. The scent proved intolerable, yet nobody uttered a word. Passing had stopped representing a happening. It constituted a component of the scenery. The Soviet commanders motivated their troops utilizing broadcasting devices. They guaranteed liquor, awards, and furloughs. The German commanders bellowed commands, yet nobody heeded any longer. Individuals complied, originating from reflex, originating from terror, to dodge getting executed, originating from the backside. The concept of triumph had dissipated. Everything that endured represented to endure 1 additional 24-hour period, 1 additional rotation, 1 additional assault. Across certain zones, the German cannons remained unanswering. 0 munitions, 0 launchers, 0 chance regarding additional troops. The troops understood they remained solitary, that whenever the adversary breached the boundary, they would perish exactly at that spot. A handful recorded their identities atop fragments of parchment and stitched them against their jackets, not regarding bureaucratic recognition, but rather ensuring that whenever anybody endured, they might notify the household. Precipitation fluid became gathered inside vacant tins. It became blended alongside soot, alongside slime, alongside rodent waste, yet it became continually consumed. There existed zero alternative. Bowel disease slaughtered beyond projectiles. The males soiled upon themselves and proceeded battling. Their garments represented a second covering of grime, dehydrated plasma, and oil. Their palms evolved shielded featuring spores. Parasites concealed themselves inside the creases regarding their throats. Their physiques shifted into a decaying shell that scarcely respired. Marksmen on the Russian front. Upon the eastern battle line, the marksman conflict remained a phantom inside a phantom. A soundless clash, wherever an improperly synchronized pulse represented adequate to slaughter. Bruno Sutkus, a Wehrmacht sharpshooter, maintained his fatality ledger featuring a strict tallying that he never confused with arrogance. Every daybreak commenced identically. A boundless drag across iced slime or drenched vegetation, his firearm shrouded inside cloths to disguise his glints, his fibers knotted, scanning regarding a gap amid bases or pulverized masonry. There he stayed immobile, respiring upon his clouded-over scope, while the daylight followed its trajectory. The discharge arrived once, possibly twice, per daytime, practically constantly against a commander, an artilleryman, or the unlucky individual who extended his skull outward from behind the ditch. Afterward arrived the shift of location, dragging an additional handful of meters, obliterating the track, blending once additionally alongside the environment. Yet Sutkus failed to stalk inside an emptiness. Even highly controlled stalkers navigated across the contrary edge. Vasily Zaitsev maintained record of his targets similarly to tracking days atop an almanac. Inside the debris of Stalingrad, he educated himself to spot a minor shift of illumination inside a vacant pane, the untraceable grinding of footwear atop pebbles. He slaughtered hundreds, educated dozens, and shifted the municipality's wreckage into his personal firing range. Targeting him, the Germans, conversely, dispatched specialists similar to Commander Koig. That clash, increasingly myth rather than record, trapped two males glaring toward one another across a magnifying lens across days until one emitted a gleam of steel, and the alternative squeezed the mechanism. This represented not an isolated instance. Ivan Kidorenko, a stony-faced Georgian, refined his marksmanship until he attained nearly 500 confirmed strikes and educated beyond 200 apprentices. Everyone among them deployed comprehending that the starting blunder would constitute the ultimate. Deeper northward, Leuda Pavlenko, Mrs. Death, tallied 300 fatalities preceding a cannon strike removed her originating from the van to exhibit her throughout Washington, similarly to an emblem regarding Soviet defiance. Siamen Namokanov, a Siberian tracker, tallied every discharge via etching a groove upon the wooden stock. Whenever he discovered himself encircled inside a canyon, he exhausted his ultimate munitions amid the withdrawal and endured breathing exclusively considering the adversary presumed nobody might endure inside. Confronting such figures, the German marksman functioned beneath directives identically supported via figures. Sutkus's register documented 209 identities, timelines, and exact lengths. He personally had educated himself to adjust his carabiner firearm via loading cardboard crates, featuring crimson marks the scale of a cuticle, and tuning the lens until he might cluster 5 projectiles inside one single puncture at 100 meters. That, or perish whenever his Soviet equivalent fired initially. Thus the everyday schedule remained a sequence of tiny choices. Does the shaking of that limb represent a bizarre breeze, or the respiration of a human? Does that shadow navigate utilizing the reasoning of the foliage, or that of the military jacket? The chill introduced an element of agony. At 20 degrees beneath freezing, respiration structured clouds that might expose someone's location. Numerous individuals shielded their mouths utilizing a frosty cloth and inhaled the filtered air to disguise it. The metal of the mechanism scorched similarly to frost whenever gripped lacking mitts, yet the mitt expanded the digit and ruined the sensation. Some removed the section of fabric atop their pointing digit to preserve touch feeling. Others relieved themselves upon the sliding mechanism to release the ice and begged not to become jammed. Psychologically, tracking represented a warping reflection. Everything nearby became shrunk into two crystal spheres, the viewer and the iris. Internally, a soundless scene. Externally, the pulse skipping inside the wrist. Whenever the round struck, the alternative individual's physique collapsed similarly to a marionette featuring its wires severed. The marksman essentially failed to detect the shriek if one existed, because the thunder regarding the blast personally robbed the noise. He exclusively witnessed the profile crumple, and instantaneously subsequently experienced that shudder comparable to whenever he immersed his palm inside iced fluid. The absolute certainty of having stolen from him every bit of his tomorrows. Occasionally the recollections resurfaced at evening, a visage captured inside the crosshairs, the crimson mark that blossomed directly inside the center. Sleeplessness remained structured, originating from those images that remained impossible to store anywhere. Both factions cultivated methods to suppress the unseen adversary. The Germans decorated dummies featuring commander headgear and elevated them atop a rod to attract Soviet gunfire. The Russians filled hats utilizing straw, allowed them to extend past the barricade, and calculated the trajectory of the round to locate the adversary's sanctuary. Whenever they uncovered the hostile marksman, they retaliated utilizing Kucha missiles or heavy cannons, aspiring to topple the timber or obliterate the barricade wherever he rested concealed. And if following a handful of moments there existed zero shifting, somebody would slither closer to observe whether he remained continually respiring. Frequently, everything they discovered remained a shattered magnifying lens and a darkened stain wherever his skull had rested. Logistics additionally provided zero relief. A marksman required premium munitions, firearm lenses lacking weapon scratches, and finely tuned firearms. Nevertheless, the resource network failed daily. Transports traversed the flatland beneath shelling. Vehicles became trapped inside an infinite swamp titled Rasputita, and parcels became allocated via random chance. Exceeding one instance, Sutkus discharged seized Yugoslav munitions since the Germans no longer possessed their personal reserves. Upon the alternative edge, Zitzov utilized German armaments discovered amid the debris whenever his personal ones became ruined via concrete powder. Renown, whenever it arrived, failed to ease the burden. A triumphant marksman drew the adversary similarly to a signal. Every strike appended rubles toward the bounty the Soviets attached atop their skulls. The Germans circulated their identities inside newsletters to elevate spirit, an iron medallion, an enhancement of personal worth. Yet that equated toward characterizing the target inside a massive promotion. Sutkus became labeled the Beast of Fenhur inside the broadcast documents. The Russians retaliated over broadcasting devices that this beast would finish off suspended, originating from his personal firearm. This represented zero empty boasting. Immediately, whenever a renowned marksman perished, the Soviet broadcasting devices recited his military history to demonstrate that even phantoms remained structured from tissue. Female involvement appended an additional aspect. Pavlichenko remained not a solitary instance. Thousands of females positioned themselves behind the rear grips and embellished their lenses featuring drawn blossoms. Her precision recalled the gentle pressure regarding stitching. Precisely the correct force, tight strand, flawless boundary. There existed complete regiments wherever the bulk of marksmen remained females, whom broadcasts characterized similarly to shielding guardians of the homeland. Yet inside the ditches, nobody pondered concerning analogies, exclusively concerning the projectile that penetrates the ocular at 300 meters. Over duration, marksman combat evolved increasingly savage and simultaneously increasingly mundane. The majority of seasoned shooters finished up featuring unseen consequences. Delicate shakes inside their digits, recoiling at the smallest snap, the urge to position themselves against a partition to protect their backsides. A handful were never capable to hunt or execute recreational shooting anew. The lens enlarged recollections earlier than targets. Others finished up acting as trainers, instructing beginners exactly how to split space via 6 and manage their respiration. They reiterated the system identically to a calculating grid. Yet during the evening, they would rouse drenched, viewing the profile that collapsed inside their lens. Anybody who failed to perish via their personal projectiles finished up asphyxiated via cannons, via spreading tissue decay, or via the quietness abandoned via harmony. Numerous individuals upon returning homeward realized they no longer perceived the environment upon a genuine scale. Everything remained cognitively enclosed via a ring of crystal. The avenue, the pasture, an infant's visage. Everything represented a prospective target. They attempted to discuss concerning it and discovered zero remarks. The marksman's occupation remained fundamentally a treaty featuring quietness, the roar of steel inside the tank battles. Whenever armored vehicles engaged inside combat upon the Eastern Front, the oxygen shifted into a thick blend of soot, shrieks, blaze, and pulverized metal. The bellow of Maybach motors resounded as though every transport represented an iron beast expelling flame and doom. Yet internally, existence remained claustrophobic, filthy, ear-shattering. There existed zero glory, exclusively a schedule of yelled directives, lubricant-soaked handles, projectiles dropping similarly to mallets, and the unceasing terror regarding a hostile illuminator exposing their location. The Totenkopf males inside their Tigers understood that every engagement might represent their final. The heavy plating regarding their armored vehicle represented zero assurance regarding anything. They comprehended the Soviets concealed anti-armor cannons inside sheds, amid wreckage beneath the frost. A trap might emerge, originating from the crest of a shallow incline, or originating from the edge of a woodland. One lone, properly directed volley could penetrate even the maximally heavily shielded flank whenever it struck at near proximity. Preceding the clash, the transport commander inspected his munitions, armor-penetrating, bursting, and fire-starting explosives. Every category possessed its mark: mechanized transports, foot soldiers, strongholds. The handlers understood it via memory. By the instance the starting hit sounded, the marksman would already remain gazing across the lens, hunting regarding the remote profile of the adversary. The conflicts frequently commenced lacking notification. A shudder, a screech of tread belts, a broadcast hissing a caution that showed up moments excessively delayed. Soviet armored vehicles comparable to the T-34 and IS-2 represented not historical artifacts. They remained swift, deadly, and abundant. Whenever the Germans detected a squad of Russian mechanized transports pushing forward across the powder or frost, They understood they could not halt them utilizing a basic boundary of gunfire. They needed to navigate, exploit the edges, anticipate regarding the flawless discharge. Occasionally, they acquired it. Occasionally, they failed. Observers characterized the internal space of the armored vehicle identically to a traveling tomb. The temperature proved intolerable. The oxygen remained dense, featuring weapon soot and the sweat of 5 males confined inside an iron enclosure. Every shudder regarding shooting shook molars. The projectile departed, featuring a bellow that forced the hearing organs to bleed, and moments subsequently, the reverberation of the strike. Whenever it struck flawlessly, the hostile armored vehicle detonated, originating from the inside, launching its top similarly to a stopper. Whenever it failed, the retaliation remained not lengthy in showing up. A near-distance strike bounced against the plating similarly to a monster's punch. The commander yelled directives. The marksman calibrated his scopes. The handler perspired, loaded an additional projectile, and sealed the mechanism anew. Everything inside moments. There existed 0 duration to worship, exclusively to endure the subsequent discharge. Whenever the hostile armored vehicle became struck, the Germans failed to rejoice. They comprehended that regarding every T-34 decimated, there existed 10 additional, and that it merely required one to slide past the boundaries to obliterate half a troop. During engagements comparable to those at Kursk, the landscape shifted into a combusting cemetery. Armored vehicles combusted. Males exited consumed via blazes. Corpses confined amid hatches. Explosives showered downward into exposed chambers. Dark soot packed the atmosphere. Occasionally they needed to escape inside moments, leaping originating from the peak of the traveling frame, sprinting beneath rapid-fire weapon gunfire, viewing their personal armored vehicle consumed via blaze. Slime represented another adversary. Treads entrenched themselves inside the mire. Certain armored vehicles remained jammed similarly to stranded mammals, incapable to shift, anticipating to become executed via a projectile. Others slipped atop the icy inclines, sliding identically to injured animals until a Soviet projectile shattered them into 2. Inside the armored vehicle, there existed 0 pondering concerning tactics, government, or concepts, exclusively endurance, discharging initially, maintaining one's skull lowered, guaranteeing the subsequent round, failed to breach across the opening. The handler's palms remained scorched, their oculars crimson originating from the explosive powder debris, their hearing drums punctured via the unceasing drone of the motor. And regardless, they proceeded moving, because whenever they deserted the armored vehicle, they remained deceased. And whenever they remained stationary, they remained deceased identically. The broadcast hissed continuously. Dispatches of fatalities, of locations, of withdrawals. The commander needed to conclude inside moments whether to charge or withdraw, whether to maneuver or forfeit an armored vehicle to shield the rest. The troops comprehended they remained not merely components, they represented traveling marks. Whatever failed to combust originating from hostile gunfire detonated originating from excessive temperature or depleted its fuel. Every engagement represented a waltz of iron, soot, and doom. Occasionally, the German armored vehicles pushed forward similarly to an unyielding boundary, crushing Soviet locations and sweeping across ditches. Alternative instances, they became trapped amid 2 blazes, encircled via hostile foot soldiers featuring fire-starting containers, adhering explosives, and missiles. The bellow of the motors shifted into the sorrowful hymn of the confined team individual. And amid that insanity, the troops inside the armored vehicle understood that nobody would observe them perish, that whenever they became struck, their physiques would become incinerated inside the marksman's chair or confined amid the treads. There would exist zero interment, zero award, merely a dispatch, an additional digit atop the registry, and an additional armored vehicle to substitute theirs inside the subsequent charge. Because armored vehicle combat possessed zero champions, exclusively survivors or leftovers. Alongside every push, the pastures remained covered, featuring incinerated tops, torn-away treads, and tops fractured open similarly to aluminum tins. Alongside every withdrawal, the teams needed to obliterate their personal armored vehicle whenever it became jammed, fearing it drop into Soviet control. And subsequently utilizing a flame tool or a destruction explosive, they bid farewell to the singular item that had shielded them originating from the external globe. Such represented armored vehicle combat upon the Eastern battle line. A traveling underworld, an engagement lacking relief, lacking span, lacking relief. A traveling ditch wherever iron provided zero sanctuary, yet solely a handful of extra moments of existence. Every engagement represented the duplication regarding the identical custom. Target, discharge, endure, collapse. The ultimate bellow arrived not originating from the motor, but originating from the quietness that endured following the ultimate blast. Because wherever plating could not reach, doom breached lacking requesting authorization, and nobody evaded its trail uninjured. The final steps of the infantry. The ultimate months regarding the German foot soldiers inside the East commenced featuring a schedule that no longer matched the conflict of navigation of 1941. Approaching the conclusion of January 1945, numerous regiments remained scarcely half their documented capacity. The everyday dispatches displayed munitions, tallies that remained inadequate regarding even a 24-hour period of continuous gunfire. Troops navigated originating from municipality to municipality, increasingly anxious regarding evading the Soviet push, rather than preserving a structured boundary. Every evening, trek equated to leaving ruined transports, perished equines, and cannon units that nobody might drag. Whenever fresh directives arrived originating from the military, the objective remained nearly constantly the identical. Seal an opening, slow a waterway passage, or defend a settlement regarding 24 hours to permit the remainder of the force to drop backward. The climate remained opposing them. The February snow flurries, coupled alongside blasts of breeze, rendered extended operation of the MG-42 rapid-fire weapons unfeasible. Munitions chains iced over, mechanisms stuck, and the barrel spark originating from the unprotected tube functioned similarly to a beacon regarding Soviet sharpshooters, outfitted featuring SVT-40 self-loading firearms. The foot soldiers, donning compressed paper footwear featuring degraded interior padding, adapted inserts originating from document and hay to avoid freezing damage. Numerous individuals forfeited sensation inside their souls, yet they continually needed to excavate fresh emplacements every evening. The active command remained to maintain their profiles minimized, not expose the positioning regarding their ditches, and conserve baton explosives since restocking no longer shipped via transport, but via wagons dragged via 10 or 12 mails. Interaction alongside the non-combatant inhabitants shifted every day. Across East Prussia, the foot soldiers abruptly discovered themselves bordered via lines of escapees running approaching the Vistula. There existed a sour jest amid the troops that they remained contending regarding the identical section of pathway. Troop commanders would reroute these lines utilizing caution discharges to sweep the pathway regarding the handful of motorized bikes continually operating, acting as messengers. Nevertheless, whenever the Soviet cannons neared, there existed zero alternative. Foot soldiers and non-combatants gathered inside common cellars, densely compressed, incapable to separate amid military jackets and farmer attire, while they trembled regarding the screeching of the Kushias. Immediate clashes progressively comprised short engagements. A Soviet squad would position utilizing rapid-fire weapons and anti-armor missile launchers, push forward reaching inside 100 meters, and discharge 2 or 3 missile blasts to breach a hole. The German foot soldiers retaliated utilizing firearm gunfire and the sporadic rapid-fire weapon, yet lacked adequate anti-armor explosives. Whenever a T-34 armored vehicle manifested atop the primary pathway, the engagement remained finished inside a time frame of moments. The troop commander generally commanded a pullback, preceding becoming encircled. This jump-by-jump pullback process eventually shrunk the factions into squads of 10 or 12 males who reorganized inside the adjoining settlement, wherever an alternative commander restructured them beneath a fresh troop digit. Health fatalities remained not exclusively stemming from gashes. Bowel disease and severe fever spread across the columns, owing to a shortage of potable fluid. Medics adapted wraps, cleansed utilizing thawed frost, and repurposed manufacturing sodium identically to an infection preventative. Painkiller dependence multiplied. Troops featuring vials of artificial narcotic to endure the trek until the resource depleted, and detox episodes commenced directly atop the vanguard boundary. Documented narratives cite males tethered against sledges to stop them originating from self-harming inside a frenzy. Approaching mid-March, whispers regarding approaching surrender blended alongside chants regarding absolute defiance. Certain commanders handed out pamphlets that discussed concerning parleys alongside the Westerners. Others reiterated Wehrmacht broadcast dispatches that continually guaranteed a retaliation upon the odor. This contradiction ruined the foot soldiers' ultimate instrument, obedience. Certain factions, possessing forfeited communication alongside higher forces, entombed their rapid-fire armaments and scattered inside non-combatant attire seized originating from deserted agricultural dwellings. Others structured tiny rearguard units to shield the evasion of their personal military division, staying inside location until their munitions remained depleted and subsequently trying to penetrate past the Soviet boundaries during evening. The instance of capitulation remained practically constantly disordered. A regiment might acquire a halt-fire directive during sunrise and simultaneously endure an introductory shelling via Soviet cannons that had not yet remained documented. Inside the bulk of situations, the capitulation became bargained at the troop elevation. The German commander relinquished his handgun, organized the males, and anticipated instructions. The Soviets neutralized the captives, seized timepieces, blades, functioning footwear, and rucksacks. The lines started away eastward practically immediately. The relocation toward confinement shifted into a physically exhausting trial comparable to any engagement. They trekked amid 20 and 30 kilometers a day. There existed zero consistent meals. The provision comprised a common container of watery mush at sunrise and transparent broth at twilight. Anybody who collapsed became driven onward utilizing a firearm stock. Whenever they failed to acquire back atop their souls, they became abandoned backward. Inside the woodlands of Belarus, it remained continually snowing, and troops started utilizing sheets originating from their terrain ledgers, similarly to wraps against the chill. Numerous exhausted individuals consumed liquid, originating from tainted pools, and contracted ailments that, coupled alongside exhaustion, slaughtered them preceding arriving at whatever facility. At train checkpoints, captives became tallied and reallocated inside livestock carriages. Anybody who continually possessed a coat or jacket utilized it to conceal the makeshift waste pit inside a edge, grasping toward the ultimate shred of dignity. Quietness dominated, disrupted sporadically via a severe hack, or the wail of a recruit excessively youthful to endure the strain. The scent of urine and perspiration saturated the timber. The transport halted exclusively to extract remains. Throughout these interruptions, the breathing remained permitted to load a container of cloudy liquid originating from an adjacent spring. After arriving at the sorting facilities, the sorting remained brief. Subordinate commanders, non-authorized commanders, enlisted males. Pictures became captured regarding every captive. Basic details became documented, and a digit became allocated to substitute their identity. Private garments became dusted, featuring sanitizing powder, and occasionally burned. Pre-owned Soviet attire, multiple sizes excessively massive, became distributed. The captives' skulls became shorn to avoid parasites. Numerous individuals possessed their facial hair shorn away alongside their dehydrated flesh, generating infections that scarcely acquired a harsh gore wrap. The initial weeks inside the facility exposed the magnitude regarding the suffering. There failed to exist adequate shelters regarding everybody. The continually frozen dirt required excavating ditches wherever spiked metal barriers became randomly positioned. The captives slumbered resting upright posterior to posterior, swapping rotations relaxing. Morning meal comprised 200 grams of dark loaf and grain brew. Whenever they remained fortunate, a section of root vegetable became included toward the twilight broth. The bureaucratic rhetoric guaranteed return following the execution of certain global pact. The truth remained that numerous among the fresh arrivals would fail to endure, to witness the subsequent freezing season. Everyday toil incorporated pathway creation and timber clearing. The labor timetable remained unyielding, 100 timbers per team preceding twilight. Lacking proper implements, they utilized dull chopping tools and unlubricated blades. Mitts represented a rarity. Palms rapidly evolved, shielded inside profound fissures that festered, featuring splinters and soil. Performers recognized amid the forces became tasked to operate squeezing instruments or makeshift pipes throughout brief interruptions to preserve elevated spirit. Some declined and became disciplined via resting upright the complete evening. Others performed quietly, while the line masticated restricted loaf, featuring shaking digits. The freezing season of 1945 toward 46 represented the initial inside confinement. Lung ailments claimed dozens every month. Timber remained scarce, and the shelters became warmed utilizing metal heaters powered via damp roots. The warmth scarcely survived an hour. To remain breathing, the captives repurposed the identical covers repeatedly, attaching patches utilizing scraps originating from root vegetable bags. Underground trading webs developed. Sections of cleanser regarding a functioning fastener. An arid tobacco roll regarding half a provision of dense broth. The makeshift ladder duplicated the military framework inside miniature. Prior commanders structured washing and allocated waste pit rotations. Non-authorized commanders maintained tally regarding the ill and deceased. The emergence of springtime yielded zero comfort. The melting shifted the facility into a swamp. The fever organism flourished, and the Soviets retaliated, featuring massive isolations. Hundreds of captives became confined regarding days inside exposed air-spiked metal enclosures, drenched featuring caustic powder and soaked via the precipitation. Endurers characterized burned flesh, and the feeling regarding the epidermis detaching identically to timber bark. The fatalities became interred inside common cavities, designated exclusively via a digit-marked post. The action regarding positioning a starting identity atop a marker became disciplined identically to conceptual subversion. Across duration, the schedule of confinement evolved identically mechanical as the conflict personally. There existed sunrise attendance counts, labor treks, and evening reviews. The captives educated themselves rudimentary Russian to bargain alongside the sentries. Jileb regarding loaf, voda regarding liquid, balet regarding agony. Unanticipated connections remained additionally established. Certain Soviets dispatched sections of loaf concealed inside an empty oil container, jeopardizing punishments. Inside exchange, German captives became educated exactly how to decode Roman digits or fix pocket timepieces. During 1947, the starting return factions became declared. It remained not an issue of military worth, but of physical condition. Anybody who could not elevate a scoop became deemed incapable regarding forced labor, and subsequently applicants regarding journey back toward Germany. The journey backward remained identically agonizing similarly to the journey outward, despite featuring reduced immediate brutality. Some exited the carriage near the boundary shoeless, shrouded inside Soviet covers, not comprehending whenever they would locate any household. Others, fatally sick, perished a handful of miles originating from their native land. Regarding anybody who endured, optimism became shrunk toward enduring an additional freezing season. They understood that every melting would claim a dozen additional. They documented the identities regarding the deceased atop makeshift markers, assured that these documents might never arrive at any Crimson Cross location. Whenever writing, nobody utilized valiant expressions. They discussed concerning chill, starvation, bowel sickness, quietness. It represented the singular method to narrate the reality lacking decoration and lacking endings simply because the narrative regarding them remained unresolved. It relied upon whether the subsequent transport would deliver root vegetables or solely freezing breeze.